planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes, and true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees, strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in demand. Right.
Our guest, who is the wonderful Melinda Myers, and there she is. How you doing, Melinda?
I'm great. It's so good to chat with you and be part of your show. This is exciting.
Well, thank you, and we're experimenting with all the bells and whistles here this morning. Like I said, I would love to turn the camera around so you can see the setup. It's rather cool. And Melinda is in Milwaukee, and if you've watched our show at all and listened to our show, you know that this woman knows just about everything there is to know about gardening. What I want to do, Melinda, is, basically I want to say yada yada yada, but no, I won't.
Go ahead, that works.
No. I got to give you the real deal. She's a.
Oh, and I forgot my ZZ plant. You guys both have your ZZs. I need to go get mine.
Oh, there we are. And you know what? And we're going to start with ZZs. I'm glad you brought that up, Peggy, because we almost talked about it last week. And then it got left behind somehow in all the madness. But first of all, let me tell everybody that Melinda's a nationally known gardening expert, TV, radio host, author, and columnist, 30 years of horticultural experience, has written more than 2,100 books on gardening. Did I exaggerate a little bit?
Just a little bit.
Okay, all right.
That's next year.
Including
That's right.
That's right. Can't Miss Small Space Gardening, the Midwest Gardener's Handbook, Jackson and Perkins' Beautiful Roses Made Easy. She hosts the nationally syndicated Melinda's Garden Moment program, which airs on more than 115 TV and radio stations. Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Is that still about the right number?
It's probably close enough. You go to my website, you can find the radio or TV station in your area. So I always send them there so I don't have to remember the numbers.
And by the way, that's Melinda Myers, Myers. Look at her name there. Go to the screen. Look under her picture. That's how you spell Melinda Myers. MelindaMyers.com. She's done the internationally distributed Great Courses, How to Grow Anything DVD series, and regular columnist for Birds and Blooms in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. That's all the time we have, Melinda. Got to go.
Okay, it's been real. Thanks.
No, and we said to her, Melinda, we've got our new show 3.0 here. We need a guest, and I'll be really honest. I said to Melinda, I want somebody I don't have to babysit, okay? Because we just wind up and turn loose. And she said, yeah, I'll do it. That's cool. And I was like, yay. So you definitely get a ding. You get a couple of dings there.
Yay. Made my day.
So before we get into outdoor gardening, because it's fall and it just makes me so sad, especially this year.
Too.
Yeah. But there's still lots to do, and it's still a good time. Let's talk about the ZZ plant. Zamocalcus zamiifolia, I believe is something like that, is the name of the plant.
Yeah.
And did I even come close to pronouncing it correctly?
Better than I would do.
And it's obviously not native to the United States, but it's a wonderful indoor plant, isn't it, Melinda?
It is. It's great for low light situations. It's great for those people like me that tend to forget to water on a regular basis. If you are an overwaterer, do a peace lily. And it likes to go dry between waterings, low light situation. I did find this one's in my office, and in the winter, my office faces west, pretty brutal winds. I have to move it back a bit. It doesn't take cold drafts. But other
Ah,
than that, very low maintenance, easy care.
yeah, it's one of those plants where it really benefits from neglect. Put it in a dark place, not a closet, but it'll take a low light situation like a champ. If you give it a little bright in direct light, it's not going to kill it. It's not going to hurt
Even
it.
better, right?
Yeah.
What about soil in the container? What's the best type of soil to put a ZZ into so it
One of the
doesn't
things I
keep wet
find,
feet?
a good quality potting mix, and I think that's
Mhm.
easier said than done. Finding the mix that matches the way you garden. I use an organic mix that uses rice hulls instead of perlite or vermiculite for drainage. And you want to make sure you have good drainage. So something with some organic matter, whether it's, peat moss, core, I'll be honest, I've not mastered that. It stays wet longer.
Let's talk about that core. COIR is how it's
That's
Right.
spelled.
coconut.
Coconut. Yeah.
The husk of coconuts, and
Hmm.
so instead of landfilling it, they're using it as a soil amendment, a seed starter mix. Um, I work with a garden center in Wisconsin, Ebert's Greenhouse Village, and that staff loves it. They find it holds the moisture. They don't have to water as often, um, and and they love it. For me, I found it just didn't work for the way I garden. So I use an organic mix with leaf compost, some peat moss, rice hulls. It matches the way I garden. It doesn't mean it's better than the other. It means it
Hmm.
matches the way I garden. And that picking the potting mix that works for you. Good drainage, as you mentioned, Peggy, is so important. So whether it's rice hulls, vermiculite, perlite, making sure that mix drains well is going to be critical. Never take soil out of your garden and put it in a pot, whether you're gardening in containers outside or inside. A lot of issues with that. So you want to make sure that and sorry for the D, make sure that
No, that's
you get a
okay
good
because
quality mix.
I have been known to do that. I have to admit, I will not out of the garden. I take it out of the compost pile, and I have
Okay,
been
well that's
different.
okay. That's compost.
And
So
what
not,
I do is
your
okay.
garden mix.
I will just pop a little. I'll take a soilless mix, um, and I will add a little bit of compost to it because I want to put a little biology in there. And I'm knocking on this table here. I have not had a problem yet. And I know you're right. You take anything from the outside that is not sterile, there's a chance you can bring a pathogen in with you. So it's
In
it's
in gardens in garden soil's the issue because that's not going to drain well versus compost.
Hmm.
oh yeah,
So
no, and
yeah,
I make sure that I
yeah,
don't put very much in there.
Yeah, you don't want the clay in there.
Yeah, no, you don't want
yes.
that. So
Yeah.
I'm
I
go ahead, Peg.
Oh no, go ahead. I have a question.
Okay, go.
It's a terminology question that probably a
Uh-oh.
lot of indoor
Oy.
gardeners may have always been afraid to ask because they figure everybody else knows this. So I'll throw this out there. When people say soilless mix,
Good question.
I'm sure some people say, but isn't it dirt? What does soilless mix technically mean?
That's a great question. There's no mineral soil that the things that we garden in outside in the mix. So it's usually organic matter like pine bark, compost core, some drainage materials like expanded clay,
Hmm.
vermiculite or perlite. So that's a great question. And one of the things about soilless mix, it tends to drain better. So that makes it good for plants that need the drainage, especially when you put soil in a pot, it impacts drainage. It doesn't drain as well as it does out in the open in ground. And that's why we use those. But it doesn't hold the nutrients either. And, Mike, your comment about adding some compost in soil biology, that's why I like this organic mix I use because it does contain compost and some soil biology. So I don't have to fertilize as often. I'm
Hmm.
feeding the soil and the plants. So, great question. So that's why with soilless mixes, we have to adjust our watering maybe more often, but always make sure the plant needs it, and then fertilize it because it doesn't hold the nutrients like our lovely clay soil does.
Well, that's okay. First of all, uh, in terms of you're right. There are some really terrific mixes out there now that have compost in them, high quality stuff that you can get. Are you willing to go out on a limb and suggest a brand or two?
I did some work in the past. I'm not working with them now. Sue, HSU. It's sometimes hard to find. That's the mix I use. They're based in Wausau, Wisconsin, and they're ginseng growers. And how they got started, it's kind of an interesting story. They were creating compost for their ginseng farms. Neighbors found out about, would come with a 5-gallon bucket and say, "Can I have some of the good stuff?" Meaning the compost. And so they decided to bag it and start selling it. And if you go to their website, it's Sue, HSU. Products, and then you can find locations, and it's around the Midwest, fairly available. You can order it online, but boy, it starts to get expensive when you ship potting mix. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, and I think and there are a number of other brands
And
out
do you
there.
you guys must have some that you like as well.
Uh,
Or are you still searching for the best?
You know what? I'm at a loss to come up with a name right now, but I know there are several brands when I go to a store and I'm looking for something, and I'll go, yeah, that's one I will use. Some of them I prefer to use brands that don't include fertilizer.
Me too.
I would rather handle that myself. Some people like that because it takes away the need to do that, but what kind of fertilizer are they putting into it? So you need to decide for yourself. But what I also tell people is, and this is regard to any kind of soil amendment as well as a potting mix, is go to your favorite independent garden center, because I always support independent garden centers, and ask them what they like. What do they use? And I think you'll get some good. Now, obviously, if they're selling various brands, they're going to try to support all of them. But you might get somebody on the QT to say, "I really like this over here." So.
And tell them the way you garden as well. Are you an overwater or an underwater gardener? It's that benign neglect thing, and that will help them help you do a better job as well. That's a great bit of advice because they can direct you accordingly. I work with Pasquesi in the Chicago area, and their team is great, and they've got some organic mixes on the shelf as well as some of the national brands that we know that aren't organic. So that also helps you. What are some of the things that you want? On Milorganite's website, I did a blog for them on soils, potting mixes, and compost. So I talk about some of those things to look for. So you might want to check that out too. Some tips on what you can look for.
And we haven't even gotten to the outdoors yet, okay?
I know, exactly.
Or finish the ZZ plant here.
Or finish. Well, and one more thing about the ZZ plant, and Peggy alluded to it, and you alluded to it, but let's call it out here. If you overwater that thing, it's done, okay? Forget it. It's going to just collapse. And knowing that, I've killed 2 ZZ plants, okay? So now I'm just ridiculously careful about what. And I read something about care of ZZ plant, and they said give it a complete watering and make sure it runs out the bottom of the drainage holes. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. Sorry. They said let it dry out and then do that, and I'm like, no, I just give it a little trickle, and I go, and it seems to do fine, and I'm leaving it with that. So
mine kind of goes on the water once every couple months, and it's happy. Seriously.
And exactly. And too much TLC.
All right.
Uh-oh.
We lost your audio there. Did you hit a button?
Okay, sorry, that was me. Better?
Yeah.
Oops.
The error occurred between the headset and the chair.
I just lost 2 years of my life right there, just letting you know.
sorry.
It's okay.
I
It's okay.
owe you.
After
You guys may not
the
be
last
seeing
2
me
weeks.
visit the show for a while.
We'll be expecting the
I'm
bags
hiding the
of
control.
soilless mix.
Yeah.
Mix. Okay.
And the other thing I learned is when I repotted one like last year or something, I did it without, I repotted it and then I just let it sit in the pot. I didn't water it in. I didn't do anything like that. I just said, no, just refuse to water it. Just let it sit, let it get acclimated to its new home. And then after a few weeks, I added a little moisture because I had done that before. I had transplanted one and I watered it in and it melted.
Ooh.
So have you had anything like that, Melinda?
Yeah, I have a Chinese evergreen that if you go, it's beautiful. And if you go, I purchased it at Pasquesi, and the sign in their shop says, "Don't water this," telling the staff not to overwater it. And so I was being good about not overwatering, and then I thought I'd neglected it. And this whole quarantine thing, I don't know about you, but keeping track of time has been very challenging. And yes, I'm drying it out in another spot where I put a sign, don't water this. So I remember to let it dry out a bit. It's another good low light plant that really prefers to go dry between waterings. And there's so many new varieties that have more colorful leaves too. So,
This was
the good news is a Chinese
Chinese
evergreen,
evergreen.
Aglaonema.
Yeah.
And so
It's a new
Aglaonema.
version of it?
Yeah. It's a new variety, some new
New
varieties out
variety?
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with some different colorful leaves. So we're seeing more and more because of the how interest in house plants, we're starting to see some cool new varieties again. Remember, I got my house plants were the gateway to horticulture for me. That's where I got excited. Yeah, what can I say? And I did interior plantscapes back then in college, and we saw tons of cool plants. And then people kind of lost interest, so the breeders weren't as busy. But now, everybody wants to grow indoors, clean the air, reduce stress. Winter's coming. Let's stock up the indoor garden, and we're seeing some cool varieties out there. Some new, different varieties, different colored foliage. Just some great options to really add a little spark to your indoor garden.
Well, we're going to break here in a second, but I do want to mention that I think a month ago or so, I posted an article about a plant, an indoor plant, a house plant that was purchased for $5,000, and
Oh,
yeah, 5,000, and it was in a pot like this, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! This is somebody's got way too much money and doesn't know what to do with it. You can throw some of that money at me if you want, but it's a thing now. People paying extravagant amounts. It's like tulipomania back in
wow.
in the Netherlands. It's just crazy. Yeah, and I believe it was. In New Zealand or Australia where this was purchased. And I would have to find the article. I can't even tell you what the plant was. But
Expensive.
it was expensive. Absolutely.
And in none of our homes, that's
Uh,
for sure.
I need to remind people that we're talking to Melinda Myers. You can see her name there, but you can go to her website, melindamyers.com, and get all kinds of great gardening information. When we come back, we're going to actually get to talking about what's going on in our yards right now. Yeah. Don't you
Yay.
by the way, don't you love how relaxed I can be about going into a break at this point? This is like, oh, okay, let's just stretch here. And okay. All right. We'll be back with Melinda Myers. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki.
I've crossed the Des Plaines, I forded the Vermilion, swum the Little Wabash, I followed the Apple, the Calumet's muddy, and the Rock River's clear, but down by the Umbra I courted my dear. She hugged me, she kissed me, she called me her dandy. The Mackinaws rocky, the Kankakee sandy. She hugged me, she kissed me, she called me her own. But down by the Umbra, she left me alone.
And of course, that is our great friend Mark Dvorak, who we need to have on this show again. We need to have him do some more music for us. That's a challenge here too. Melinda Myers is in the age of the inner tubes here, playing music that they're not gonna smack you down because of
Right.
copyright restrictions
Right.
on radio. As you know, you could play just about anything as long as the station had a license, and on with Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and you have to be much more careful. That was recorded in the studio when we had him in there, so I don't have to worry about that because he was there in person. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. So pleased to have Melinda Myers, horticulturist extraordinaire, on the show with us today. And yeah, let's get to the fall. All right, and what we're doing, we had. Yeah, I know. And a friend of mine said, you got to talk to her about preparing your fall bed. And Melinda wrote back to me, well, how about extending the season? You guys had you from your email, it was hard to know. You had a couple of typos in there, Melinda, but
Oh, sorry. As always.
but I got the impression you'd already had a hard freeze up in Milwaukee.
Well, I'm west of the city. And so when I lived in the city, it was great because I could ignore the first few frost warnings, not a problem. But now I have to pay attention. It was down to 32. I think that was Thursday night, Wednesday or Thursday night. We're due for another one possibly tonight where I live.
Tonight.
And
Yeah, no,
you
we
know
are
what?
too. We are too. We're going to,
Okay.
it's a warning to folks that, and I'm going to have to get out there. And I've got a bunch of tropicals in the backyard that I didn't even think about until just now. No ZZ plants out there, but there are others that I'm going to have to. Well,
You got to get that avocado in.
I'm going to talk to meteorologist Rick DeMaio, who's going to be on the show later, God willing, and ask him in the city. See, it looks like we're in that area where I got a feeling we'll be at like 35, and if we're there
Right.
or a little higher, most of those tropicals can handle that. But some might, I might get my avocado in. That might be one that I will schlep into the basement.
And the ones that are further away from the house as well.
Good point.
Are more vulnerable than those close.
Yeah.
And any low spots in the garden. I mean, I can track where, even though we had 32, it might have been 32.3. So my sweet potatoes bit the dust because I didn't cover them. I'm like, they're underground. I'll dig them up. But I got a late start getting my tomatoes out. So I have tons of tomatoes. I picked everything that was ripe, everything starting to show color, everything that was green and lightening up. I have tables in the basement filled with tomatoes. My father would be so proud. That was our ping pong table every fall, tomatoes ripening inside. Picked my peppers, but I covered everything because then we're supposed to have 70 degrees this week after this tough frost, right? And so often we have a couple of freezes and then we have warm weather. So I'm hoping that I'll get some time to ripen some of those other veggies. And I have hardy figs that are loaded, but they're not ready. And I'm so sad. Last year, the ground squirrels ate them all. This year, I used plant skid. It's kept the ground squirrels away, but the cold came. So Remay, floating row covers, they let air, light, and water through, but trap the heat. I've pulled out every old sheet. I never throw away old bed sheets because, right? And that's what covers my plants near the house and some of the things in the garden. My fiance Pete goes, wow, it looks like Halloween out there when you look in my garden because of all the covers. But, and I'm always out there covering, but, if I get a couple more weeks of the growing season, I'm going to be happy. And then you don't always get things in it. Move things into the garage, wheel them out. I'm still doing quite a bit of media. Now it comes to me. So my garden needs to look good and I need some props in the background, right? So you need those plants to fill in. So it's that time of year where you're trying to buy as much time as we can in the garden season for those of us in the north.
And as you say, it's so frustrating knowing that there are going to be temperatures in the 70s this coming week. And in fact, I could put a map up about that. In fact, okay, now I'm just going to.
While you're hunting,
he's feeling confident
for the map.
No,
things like basil. It's time to basil plants. Usually under about 35, they start giving up. So
yeah,
bring
we
those
coleus. And coleus. I had my coleus covered by the house. One of them must not have been totally covered. I had a little bit of damage. So they're inside too. So impatiens, coleus, basil, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, really need that protection. So
Well,
time to bring those
I just
in.
had a listener write on Facebook here. Does our tomatoes done for in Chicago after tonight? And I'm going to say no. I don't think so
I'm with
because
you.
I think that okay, Rick DeMaio defines a hard freeze as 28 degrees or lower
Sustained.
for 4 consecutive hours. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get anything like that tonight. Again, he'll be on later and tell us. But in terms, while I'm going to bring in my huge 7 foot tall avocado plant because I've put too much effort into it, I'm not going to do
It's
anything
part of the family.
yeah. I'm not going to do anything for the tomatoes because I'm going to assume they're going to get through this and
Yeah.
continue. And then next week, when it gets warm, some of those tomatoes will continue to ripen.
Like you
And
said, throw an old bed sheet over them or a blanket.
Yeah,
yeah, if you're that concerned about it, yeah, you do that, and that'll take care of it. And it'll be an early Halloween because it'll look like ghosts in your backyard.
exactly.
So, all right, now I'm gonna do my magical trick and look at this, folks.
Uh-oh.
All right, well, all
Ooh.
right. So let's pull these our guest shots off here, and you can see this
Thank
is
you. Yes.
yeah, I know. You can see what's planned for
Ah,
this week.
we
This
already
is
did the ooh, so I was doing the ahs.
yeah. This is the 8 to 14 day temperature probability. Yeah,
Wow.
this is what it's going to look like for the coming week. So if you can get through tonight in your garden, then you're probably going to be okay. And by the way, those of you who are listening on the podcast, you can't see this obviously because it's on the podcast. That's That's why I encourage you to tune into the Facebook, YouTube, and whatever we choose as the social media outlet to be named later. And you get to see some of these things. So let's bring back our screens here and our guest Melinda Myers. So it's a hard thing. It's difficult in the fall to make those calls, isn't it?
It is. And at some point, I have some gardening friends out in California that say, you're so lucky you have you have a break in the garden season. When I was covering my tomatoes, I wasn't feeling really lucky. But at some point we do, at some point we do get a break and we get to recharge. We get to focus inside, whether we're growing edibles, herbs, or houseplants inside, we get a chance to kind of take a break, rethink, make that list of what we want to do different next year. I mean, I don't know about you, but every day I'm gardening, I'm like, oh, next year I need to not do this. I need to do this. But right now it's a scramble. It's a scramble to keep the weeds. I'm still weeding. My theory is every
Really?
weed I pull now, oh, I've been weeding all year, and okay. We finish a bed, and 3 days later, I got seedlings coming up, and so
Yeah.
every weed I pull now are fewer weeds next year. And I'm working on. I'm starting a couple new beds because I'm insane, and I'm going to take that sod and create raised beds with it. Last year, I started a new bed. We took the turf, weeds and all, face down, created raised beds. So we lay a layer of that sod, green side down, put some Milorganite, another layer, put some Milorganite. If you have compost in between. And those were the best tomatoes I've had. I have sandy soil. And so I've created this great, and then I covered it with plastic for the winter to try to kill all the grass, any weeds and grass. And I'll tell you, I had the best tomatoes I've had in how long have I lived here? 7 years I've lived here. And I've got a new bed started, and I'm going to do the same thing because it's a great way to build soil for me. So many of us have heavy clay soil that doesn't drain well, or I have sandy, rocky soil.
Yeah.
And
Wait.
so,
Can I ask a question? You're west of
sure.
Milwaukee. How do you have sandy soil?
The kettle moraine, man, those glaciers dumped a lot of the sand and rocks. So every time I try to plant a bulb, I remove 5 rocks and put a bulb in. I have some rocks that are so big I have to move the plant because I can't even find the edges of the stones. So
Yikes.
I'm kind of where the glacier dumped a lot. So sand is nice when you get rain. It drains. You can add compost. I had clay soil before and 26 years of amending. It was beautiful that I left that soil. So now I'm trying to find fast ways to fix my soil.
Yeah.
And that worked really well. The raised beds with the sod rather than composting it, which is another option. Or if you're in a small space, what do you do with it? We just put a rain garden in. We just installed a rain garden for a video we're doing, and she's in a small city lot, and she's using it. We hauled it into her back to kind of change the grade by her house. So instead of hauling in topsoil, we took some of the soil removed for the rain garden. She filled in under her steps where soil had eroded, and then is going to use that sod, green side down, to create that grade away from her house. So trying to find creative ways, especially in a small space situation,
Uh,
to be sustainable and repurpose those items instead of throwing them into the
Definitely.
landfill or
And you're making a really good point about green side down, and there's the joke about green side up. But we won't go down that
we're
road.
talking
Oh,
killing it.
details,
Okay.
details.
We're talking about killing sod, which is don't throw it away. You turn it upside down and let the nutrients stay in your soil, and then the grass will die and it decomposes, and now you've got more nutrients.
Exactly. And you can compost it if you don't want to start a new bed. And if you have bare spots in your lawn, then use it to replace those. But I think,
Mhm.
I think if there's anything good about this year, we've had more time to really evaluate our lifestyle for many of us and thinking about how you can be more sustainable. And it's challenging in small spaces. I get that. I was a small space gardener for 26 years. It's more challenging than if you have more room. But boy, small space gardeners are pretty creative in finding solutions. And
Well,
sometimes it's just stepping back and thinking about it.
yeah, I suspect you have. How large is your garden?
Well, I have several different plots. So I live on
Okay.
11 acres and 3.5 is
Yikes.
forest.
Okay.
Yeah, and which luckily, but I have buckthorn and honeysuckle to remove. But I have a
Hmm.
large garden area fenced in that we videotape and do photography, and that's 60 by 100 and something. So
Yeah.
it's got beds and it's so I can't. I get it. It's oh, we took this and made raised beds. But I still do small space things because there's a lot of small space gardeners out there,
Well, how are you
and
going to
I know
stay
the
in
Yeah.
touch with
pain
them
and the
if you don't do
challenge.
that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
But
could be your kitchen garden in a small space, for example.
Exactly. And I still do containers because I want certain things right outside my kitchen door. I still do pots of herbs and tomatoes and things that when I'm cooking, oh, I forgot this, I can run out and harvest. Or if I have guests, we can pick our own tomatoes and throw them on the salad.
and my garden is, when we talk about the back 40, we're talking about the back 40 feet. All right.
Okay. And
I
mine wasn't even that big in the city, so I totally get it.
Mine's actually about
Yeah.
20. Mine's about 20 by 30. All right. So
Okay.
it's a very different situation. And when you talk about pulling weeds, uh, it, in the course of the year, and by the way, as you say, in the pandemic year, a lot of our gardens have never looked better. Because
Exactly.
that's
Mine
where we were
too.
stuck. I mean, I can't tell you. It still looks great. And about getting to fall maintenance, I'm not going to do a lot because what I do is I let the plants just collapse. The
Hmm.
exceptions will probably be the vegetables like the tomatoes and the squash vines that I'll get rid of. I'm trying to think of what else I might uh, remove, but usually I let because I have a lot of natives in the yard too, and plants with stems where insects can overwinter, and you
Yep.
just leave the leaves
And you,
is
you leave the brush piles there for them to overwinter as well.
Exactly. And when I've always been a proponent in my very first book, I said, leave your garden stand for winter. And I was teaching at the time, and a graphic art teacher read my book. He goes, I think you're lazy. And I said, no, seriously. I leave the thing stand. It brings the birds in, the color and motion
Hmm.
they add to the winter landscape. I leave them stand, as you mentioned, Mike, for the pollinators. Leaves are a great mulch, and that's where a lot of things overwinter in that leaf debris. So leaving those is important. Well, he did leave his garden stand. He said, well, if you can do this, I'm going to do it. And he called me in the spring. He goes, I had more birds than I've ever had in my backyard because I left all those healthy, disease-free perennials stand for winter. Because I
Yeah.
still think you're lazy, but it really works.
well, this
So you're right.
disease free is the key.
Right.
Now,
Get rid of anything that's diseased, right?
now, do you consider powdery mildew a disease?
You know what? It's impossible to keep powdery mildew out. Different strains attack different plants.
Right.
Now, for peonies, then the last 15 years, powdery mildew's been an issue. So I will cut it back and throw that. You can bury it off-site. You could compost it. Some municipalities will pick some of that up, but then you're putting it in the community compost. Tar spot on maples. I know all the pathologists say to get rid of those leaves. When I lived in the city, everybody had a Norway maple street tree. The park had a Norway maple. They all had tar spot.
Right.
I shredded mine with the mower and left it on the lawn. I figured it is not going to make that big a difference. And my tree
It's
was
coming
fine,
back anyways.
okay? Exactly. So I might as well take the benefit of those leaves fertilizing my lawn as opposed to raking them to the curb for the city to haul away. Powdery mildew, yeah, if you can minimize those susceptible plants, compost, a good compost once it's broken down thoroughly, you should be fine. Or use that compost on different plants because there are different strains of mildew. The ones that attack the zucchini and squash are different than those that attack your phlox, then attack your lawn. So
pretty much, there's a whole laundry list of plants that get powdery mildew, and if you got rid of all of, look, Monarda gets it.
You'd still get it.
Yeah.
You'd still get powdery mildew.
And
so it's another one of those like tar spot.
But one of the things I did this summer that I'm kind of proud of myself of was the zucchini plant. The minute I saw a powdery mildew spot, whoop, that leaf's gone, and it's out of here. And it's really, the plant has held up really well over the summer.
Colorado State University is one of the places I go. Obviously, I use our own local university extension. Illinois has great resources too. All the states have a connection to the extension.
Michigan State, Cornell, Ohio State,
Cornell.
Purdue. There's some wonderful, wonderful universities. And when you're doing research, let me do a plug for the universities. Look for something .edu before you go to any commercial site about gardening. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you put that plug in. Colorado State University does a lot with organic controls, and so sometimes I'll look at those sources we talked about, my local source, but also see what's happening at Colorado State University. And they'd found that horticulture oils really provided a long-term benefit, something like a Summit year-round spray oil, lightweight oil. They found really provided up to 30 days control for mildew. I don't spray for mildew because I know I'm not going to get out there regularly. Cornell found that baking soda mixed with horticulture oil or insecticidal soap also works if you're looking for organic options to control. But I plant shorter things in front of my phlox and Monarda that get powdery mildew to cover the leaves because they're going to come back next year. I'm not going to deal with it. But, thinning them out in this, that's the reality. Sometimes you just gotta go, okay.
I'm not going to deal with that.
Exactly. So if you keep it, either mask it, or do the thinning. But there's lots of good options out. I think the good thing is more and more people are concerned about what we're putting on our plants and the impact on the environment. So we're seeing more research on that. And so I think, we saw some of that in the late 70s and it kind of disappeared. But I'm hoping it's here to stay now. I'm hoping that we continue. I'm going to get off my soapbox in a minute, but continue demanding for some, good ecological solutions, whether it's, okay, I'm just going to write that off. I'll go to the farmer's market if my tomato crop is terrible. But I have to tell you, I grew Resilience Roma tomatoes. It's an all-America selection. And I'll tell you, I've got the best Roma tomatoes, disease-free, and I picked a bunch of them, no spots, no septoria leaf spot on the fruit. And I usually get some, and I overplant, even though I have a lot of space. So I've just been really impressed because I had a table full of Romas that are ripening, and I don't have any disease on those. And that's pretty amazing. I know it was a drier year for me, but still, it's got good disease resistance.
It's so interesting because all of us want to support heirloom varieties, and then you plant something like that Roma tomato. And I'll be honest, I've been planting for the last several years the tomatoes from Dr. Harry Klee at the University of Florida. Especially his hybrid is like the most amazingly prolific and wonderful, and they're all tasty. They're all tough as nails, but not, it doesn't, it's not like biting into a cardboard or anything like that. I mean, he bred them so that they could ship, they would have flavor, and they'd be prolific. And I planted his W hybrid. That's my favorite. The Garden Gem is a wonderful tomato, but it's like a Roma. It's like more like a plum tomato.
It's much smaller, yeah.
And then the Garden Treasure did okay, not as good as the hybrid. And I'm telling you, and they're starting to sell those now through Proven Winners. And
good.
And I don't know how well that went this year with the pandemic. I know the first year they ran out of seed very quickly. But again, I also grew a Wisconsin 55, which did very well, and a Tasmanian chocolate dwarf tomato, which was not prolific, but boy, we just harvested a couple of them, probably the last ones of the year, and they're just wonderful.
Yeah, and I think finding what works well for you. The other one that I every time I bring people in the garden, I like to try new and different things. And I'm going to call you in the spring because I want to try his tomatoes. You've raved about them. But I grew yellow apple, which is a small plum, but it's got interesting shape like an apple, and it's yellow. And everybody, the flavor is incredible. And the plug from AAS, the marketing material, said it produces up to 1,000 per plant. I think they underestimated it because I've been giving bags away, and I have a table full of those too, and more on the plant.
Send us some seeds.
One would have been enough. I will,
and I'll get you some, and I can get you some seeds from KC tomato. Now I grew. The one that was really interesting this year was called Sun Lucky, and it's slightly larger than cherry.
I'm taking notes when you see me looking down.
Yeah, okay.
My plant still has a lot of green Sun Luckies on it right now.
Yeah, and we've been harvesting it. It didn't even produce a tomato until the end of July. All right. And then since then, it's been great. And what's really cool about them is once they fully ripen, they're red on the outside, and you cut them open, they're orange on the inside.
Ooh.
And delightful flavor. Just wonderful. So, Casey, if you're listening, dude, you get a ding. Okay.
Hey, Casey.
So
and
does
they're
he
about
sell
7 feet tall.
Okay, so you need a ladder to harvest. Okay, so does he sell? Yeah. Can you buy the seeds and start them yourself?
He has them available.
You have to have a connection like you.
You know what? I will get you some seeds, but he has them available.
Have some in the.
Yeah, go ahead, Peggy.
Some are in the Seed Savers Exchange. Some of them.
Okay, that's good to. I'm thinking other people. I mean, you've convinced me. The last time I was on, you talked about these.
You know, yes. I should mention we're talking to Melinda Myers. Go to melindamyers.com. We have just a couple of minutes here before I'm going to let you go. On a note that you probably don't want to go into.
Okay.
Peggy sent me this the other day. Murder hornets are back. I know, just like the dumbest thing ever, but apparently there's a colony somewhere in Washington State because a few more have shown up. You sent me the article, Peggy. Did
Yeah, it was yesterday. It was on a lot of news channels, including New York Times, saying they thought nothing was there, but now they have found several of them, and the university's looking for them before they get to the slaughter phase. They have a slaughter phase.
What's
the slaughter phase is that's the point apparently in the murder hornet life cycle where it goes and bites the heads off bees.
Oh, and oh my God, there's this guy says he spotted an Asian giant hornet on his property September 21st and used a can of wasp spray to kill it. Okay. He says, I was a little weak in the knees after seeing the hornet up close in the shop. My heart was beating fast.
And you know what's always the challenge is hornets and wasps are pollinators. So there's the invasives that we don't want, like jumping worms in our garden,
and murder hornets.
And murder hornets. But if we start killing everything, I always worry that people get so concerned they start killing everything. So make sure you know what you have. Report it to your extension service if you think you found it, because that's the only way we're going to monitor.
And earlier in the year, when people found them, they started killing all kinds of hornets because they thought they were murder hornets. And folks, just stop, okay? Just knock it off. Maybe if you can identify one, get a photo or something, that's one thing, but don't just start killing everything
Yeah.
in the
And
neighborhood.
they're only in Washington State, so if you're not going to see one around the Midwest.
All right. Melinda Myers, any final words you'd like to have here before we let you go?
I'm going to put a request to all your avid gardeners out there listening. Help the newbies. We want to keep those new gardeners coming back. And if you're a new gardener listening, keep coming back. Every season, there are new challenges, new opportunities, and lots of success. Hopefully, you found the joy in gardening, but please help share that joy with others. Kids right now are very stressed. Gardening is good for them. Help them, whether they're homeschooling or going into school wearing masks all day. Get them to plant some bulbs this fall. Plant some herbs in a windowsill garden. Grow a ZZ plant. Everyone will be successful.
Do some
But
microgreens. They're
he,
simple.
and they're fast. Good point. And nutritious. And don't tell them they're nutritious. And they'll never know, and they'll keep eating them. So
Well,
that's just my
and when you
plea.
grow stuff indoors, like with your Happy Leaf LED grow lights, it's so much fun.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy. It's so much fun to watch that grow. We had a crop going well into the summer, and we're gonna start again now in the fall. You can do a whole salad from a few mason jars sitting on a shelf.
Exactly. And it's a good experiment. It's science lessons, math lessons, and just good for the mind, body, and spirit. So,
Yeah.
help those newbies, help your kids get through these stressful times, or any youth in your life, and keep gardening, because it's going to make us all happy and we'll be much better off for it.
Okay, I'm going to do something right now just to make sure we're cool here. Sherry Doyle, or Doyle, sorry. Are you there? I don't see you on the screen. I just want to make sure. Yes, you are. Great. That's good to know. And Lisa, I hope I'm going to be popping up something for you. So I was just making sure that Sherry is there. So we're ready for the next segment. So everybody stand by. Melinda Myers. Again, go to Melinda Myers, MYERS.com. You are the best. And by the way, there was a weird thing that popped up. I got a Google alert about how you were going to be on our show. Oh, wait, was so funny.
And now I'm off. Okay.
No. This is
Okay.
the part of it that was just hilarious was, that's that. No, not the one that has you over 30 years of experience. It says, the second Sunday of each month between now and December, horticultural expert Melinda Meyer returns to the show. I went, no.
Is this a trick, Mike? Wait, is this a trick?
We forgot to tell you, but
no,
Exactly.
that's not how it works. It actually was running two sentences together. One of them referred to the segment we're doing next. So
okay.
That's why it showed up. But don't worry, you have not committed yourself to something you...
I will come back, but not every second Sunday. I love you guys. But,
but I get it. There are limits.
even if we bring the cinnamon rolls, wait a minute.
Thank you.
But they're there. It's kind of...
Melinda Myers, thank you so much. You have a great Sunday, and we'll talk real soon.
Sounds good, you guys. Take care. Thanks so much for letting me be part of your show.
Oh, thank you so much for being part of 3.0, or I don't know, 2.0, 3.0, whatever.
It is,
But
right?
so far, I'm knocking on wood here. It's doing okay. All right, we'll talk to you later.